Within the imposing concrete walls of Site Redacted, a nervous energy crackled through the sterile halls. Men and women in crisp white lab coats scurried to and fro, their faces tense with purpose. They carried clipboards bursting with confidential documents, whispering furtively to one another when security personnel passed by on patrol. This nondescript building hid unimaginable secrets from the world outside its barricaded gates. Deep in the secure underground vaults of the facility, down a dizzying maze of elevators and steel doors requiring complex numerical passcodes, lay the most dangerous anomalies contained by the Clandestine Foundation. Grotesque creatures, unnatural artifacts, and reality-bending oddities. All were meticulously confined far from prying eyes. But there was one entity that inspired an almost primal dread in those aware of its existence. SCP-096. Its file was buried in the deepest recesses of the archives, accessible only to a select few with the highest clearances. Pages upon pages of unnerving details lay within. Grainy photographs of an emaciated humanoid form with waxen pale skin stretched tight over an elongated skull, bony limbs jutting at impossible angles like a marionette's. Handwritten accounts telling of the unpredictable berserker rage triggered by the slightest glimpse of SCP-096's face, unleashing an unstoppable force of destruction as it hunted down every witness with single-minded ferocity. Chilling autopsy reports of victims found contorted and mutilated beyond recognition. Warnings etched in red to avoid visual contact at all costs. This obscure file dripped with an aura of primordial fear, somehow radiating the entity's malevolence from within its pages. Dr. Jameson shuddered as he pored over the file late one night, secreted away in a remote storage room. His heart raced with exhilaration and dread. He had first stumbled upon a reference to SCP-096 weeks earlier while researching a related project. Since then, dangerous obsession had taken root within him. He knew he was breaking every rule by sneaking into this restricted area, but he could not resist the siren song of such a lethal anomaly. What true nature lay beneath its bizarre human guise? What fueled its berserk reactions? How could it be neutralized? The questions consumed his thoughts. Hiding the file beneath his coat, Dr. Jameson stole through the shadowy halls. Security cameras tracked his movements, but he had painstakingly memorized their blind spots after weeks of meticulous study. Slipping past the grim guards with bated breath, he descended into the bowels of Site. Redacted through a maze of checkpoints and containment cells, he longed to see SCP-096 with his own eyes. At last he reached the final barrier, a thick blast door emblazoned with dire warnings. Entering the observation room, he beheld the entity for the first time, SCP-096 pacing the floor of its stark cell in stuttering fits and starts. Its freakishly gaunt body seemed to contort unnaturally with each movement. The ashen skin was pulled taut over its elongated skull. Empty black eyes stared ahead from sunken sockets. Jameson's mouth went dry, sensations of awe and dread welling up within him. This mere glimpse fueled his obsession. In the weeks that followed, Jameson's fixation became all-consuming. He knew on some level that he should stop this dangerous line of inquiry, but he seemed helpless to resist its pull. At night, he would return to secretly observe SCP-096 for hours, studying its erratic movements and trying to intuit the enigmatic force behind its black eyes. Colleagues noticed the researcher becoming more drawn and haggard, his thoughts clearly preoccupied. Jameson's curiosity was metastasizing into a dangerous mania. It was only a matter of time before the compulsion became too great. Jameson gathered a small team of researchers as enthralled by SCP-096 as himself. Together, they prepared for a radical experiment to more directly observe the creature's behavior using remote cameras and sensors. Jameson convinced them it was worth the risk, appealing to their shared lust for knowledge. But as they made final preparations, the knot in Jameson's stomach betrayed his calm demeanor. The feeling that they were making a terrible mistake gnawed at him. But it was too late to turn back now. The observation room was filled with nervous energy as the team switched on the cameras, the screens flickering to life with glimpses of SCP-096's cell. Jameson tried to steady his breathing, hoping his terrifying hunch would not come true. For several moments, there was only stillness on the displays. But then a camera feed glitched, the image distorting for a split second. A bone-chilling shriek rang out, jolting the researchers. SCP-096 slammed against the interior door with tremendous force, again and again, the deafening blows resonating through the room. Dread seeped into Jameson's bones, realizing they had awoken a nightmare. The reinforced steel door finally gave way under the onslaught, torn from its hinges and skidding across the floor. There stood SCP-096, fleshless arms hanging limply at its sides, mouth yawning open impossibly wide in a silent howl. Then it began to walk, slowly at first, but rapidly accelerating to an inhuman pace. Reality sunk in. There would be no stopping it now. Jameson's heart hammered as panic consumed the facility. Personnel fled in all directions, but escape was impossible. The rapid staccato of footsteps echoed as SCP-096 coursed through corridors, guided unerringly like a heat-seeking missile towards each witness. One by one it ran them down, talons slicing through tissue and bone with chilling efficiency. Tortured screams rang out, only to be swiftly extinguished in sickening crunches and rips. Jameson desperately herded his colleagues along, knowing their only hope was to buy precious time. But he sensed the entity inexorably closing in for the kill. Rounding a corner, Jameson found his path cut off, a dead end. The others continued ahead to their doomed fates. He turned slowly to face the creature now looming before him, its skeletal frame awash in viscera and gore from the fresh kills. Jameson saw his life flash before his eyes, consumed by regret and horror at what his reckless curiosity had unleashed. SCP-096's talons flexed, ready to rend his fragile body to pieces. This was the end it had all been leading to, death at the hands of the very anomaly that had consumed his waking thoughts until the end. The cold talons closed around Jameson's neck, lifting him effortlessly as his vision dimmed, life bleeding out onto the pitiless concrete floor. Darkness embraced him, and he knew no more. The chaos unleashed within Site Redacted continued unabated. Personnel fled in blind terror through the crisp, sterile halls now splashed with crimson, the rapid reports of gunfire echoing along with screams of the dying. Security teams raced to respond, but their weapons seemed only to slow, not stop. The relentless advance of SCP-096. It shrugged off hails of bullets and kept coming, cadaverous body leaking sickly ichor from its wounds but never faltering in its pursuit. Dr. Kendrick sprinted through the mayhem, his heart seized by primal fear. As a senior researcher, he had known of SCP-096, but never dared to breach protocol and view its file. Now he wondered if such dangerous knowledge could have prevented this catastrophe. Guilt gnawed at him amidst the panic. He skidded into a security checkpoint, reflexively swiping his keycard before entering the heavy blast door. It sealed behind him with a depressurized hiss. For a moment, silence fell, the din of chaos temporarily muted. Kendrick tried to catch his breath in the stillness of the bunker, but then, faint at first but swiftly growing louder, came the telltale rapid footsteps. Kendrick's blood turned to ice. It had found him. The door began to dent inward under repeated impacts, metal groaning. Kendrick scurried backward, fumbling for his gun with trembling hands. He knew it was futile, but he had to try. The blast door finally toppled, and there it stood. SCP-096, looming in the doorway. Kendrick fired wildly, but the entity barely flinched, bullets flattening against its translucent skin. It fell upon him in seconds. Visceral screams cut short as darkness embraced him. Meanwhile, personnel struggled to restore containment, sealing off sections of the facility one by one to herd SCP-096 back to its cell. But it seemed to slip through their grasp, disappearing into air vents and maintenance tunnels before emerging elsewhere in a series of blinding hit-and-run attacks. Broken bodies were left strewn in its wake. In the observation wing, Dr. Janssen sealed the blast doors to the outside world, barricading himself in. He knew it was only a matter of time before 096 came for him too. Janssen stared at the security monitors, watching the carnage unfold. He wondered bleakly if this would be the end of Site Redacted, its clandestine mission compromised by an outbreak of its own making. The Foundation might contain many horrors, but none compared to the nightmare unleashed today. A blaring alarm jarred him from his thoughts. Perimeter breach detected. Janssen's heart sank. The entity had escaped into the outside world, beyond their fortified walls. He imagined SCP-096 loose upon humanity, hunting prey in an ever-widening circle, until containment was re-established. It could be months or years, before the death toll stopped climbing. Janssen knew then that the Foundation's darkest secret was out. There would be investigations, audits, recriminations, but none of that mattered now. The dead were beyond justice. Site Redacted would forever bear the stain of this failure. All that remained was trying to staunch the bleeding, mitigate the casualties, and pray that one day they could imprison this entity again, before the whole world witnessed its horrific capabilities. Janssen bowed his head, weary with the knowledge that when Pandora's box opens, there is often no closing it again. The containment breach of SCP-096 unleashed chaos and terror across the region and beyond. Despite the Foundation's most desperate efforts to keep the incident secret, word of the unstoppable creature soon spread. Panic gripped local communities as bizarre murders multiplied. The macabre handiwork of 096 evident in the state of the mutilated bodies. Baseless rumors gave the faceless killer an array of sensationalized names. The Reaper, Skin Stealer, the Unseen. Mass hysteria grew with each gruesome slaying, as SCP-096 spiraled outwards on its relentless hunt. No corner was remote enough to escape its path. Once a face had been glimpsed. Desperate people tried fleeing their homes, only to find death waiting on the open roads or in crowded shelters. The body count swelled by the hundreds, then thousands. Governments struggled to maintain order, instituting martial law and futile security measures. Efforts to stop SCP-096 proved ineffective, the entity shrugging off bullets and bombs during chance encounters. Before resuming its interminable tracking, satellite tracking systems traced its meandering trail of carnage spanning continents. The Foundation suppressed what information it could, disseminating false narratives to mask the truth. Inside the ravaged ruins of Site Redacted, the remnants of personnel succumbed to despair. All attempts to lure or force SCP-096 back into containment had failed spectacularly. Without its anchor, the creature roamed free and unchecked. Some lost themselves in survivor's guilt, having unwittingly glimpsed 096's face on monitors during the breakout. Now there was no escaping their sealed fates, only the question of when the silent stalker's footsteps would finally come for them. Dr. Janssen remained sequestered in his observation room, the only space not yet breached. He shuddered at the security footage showing the creature's gory handiwork within these once sterile halls. In the early months, he had clung to frail hope that they could still salvage this disaster. But as time stretched on, hope withered. Containment now seemed a fading dream. The scarred husk of the facility stood as a monument to their hubris. Somewhere out there, the entity continued its protracted hunt, never resting, drawn by the compulsions embedded deep within its alien mind. How long would it wander the earth unchecked, leaving twisted remains in its wake? How many more lives would be sacrificed before 096's mission was finally fulfilled? Janssen bowed under the weight of these grim questions, knowing the ruins of a broken world might hold the only answers. After years of roaming unchecked, leaving countless victims, in its wake, SCP-096 was finally recontained. The turning point came with the development of advanced facial recognition algorithms that could rapidly detect and censor images of 096 before human eyes could glimpse them. Linked to surveillance systems worldwide, this technology severely limited new witnesses and allowed the Foundation to closely track the creature's movements. They plotted an elaborate trap, identifying its hunting pattern and destination. Within a sprawling, abandoned factory, they prepared a fortified cryogenic chamber. When 096 arrived to claim its next quarry, powerful industrial lasers seared its pale flesh, while blast doors slowed its advance. Finally, it was lured into the sub-zero cryo chamber, which instantly froze it solid, halting its rampage. Transporting the frozen entity proved a logistical nightmare, requiring total information lockdown. One accidental glimpse could unleash catastrophe anew. But finally, SCP-096 arrived back at the reconstructed Site Alpha, Redacted containment facility. Here it remains, entombed indefinitely on the lowest sublevel, under 24/7 observation. Witness statements are immediately analyzed by AI for any possible leakage. Dr. Janssen serves as lead researcher, studying possible methods to neutralize 096 permanently, should containment ever fail again. But he harbors no illusions that such knowledge can undo the scars left by 096 upon the world. While its victims can be counted, the psychological trauma spreads insidiously, a lingering collective dread. The entity's breach remains the Foundation's greatest failure. Johnson still wakes screaming some nights, haunted by visions of bloodshed and cruelty. On bad days, he wonders if containment is merely postponing the inevitable. Perhaps some anomalies are beyond control, fated to inevitably resurface over time, like a doomsday clock counting down to humanity's ruin. But he keeps such bleak musings to himself, choosing to focus only on the work immediately before him. Darkness gathers soon enough, without being summoned,